Hello, it's Wednesday, the 2nd of May, 2018 at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is Student Affairs Live, the online learning community for student affairs educators in higher education. I'm your host, Heather Shea, broadcasting live from Michigan State University, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. In a moment, I'll introduce the panelists joining me today to talk about developing a comprehensive co-curricular record. But before I do that, I need to give thanks to those who make these free webcasts possible. Today's episode is sponsored by ACPA, College Student Educators International. Support for Student Affairs Live is one of the many ways that ACPA provides innovative professional development. You can visit myacpa.org to discover other opportunities, including the upcoming Institute on the Curricular Approach, formerly known as the Residential Curriculum Institute. The 12th Annual Institute will take place on Monday, October 15th, 2018 in Chicago, Illinois, and the name change reflects the application of a curricular approach beyond residential life and throughout student affairs. So you can learn more about the new institute by visiting the link that we're tweeting out now. Student Affairs Live is also a part of the Higher Ed Live network. Our episodes offer you direct access to the best and brightest minds in education. You can be a part of our live broadcast by sharing your knowledge. Thank you to my friend and colleague, Erica Thompson, for monitoring today's back channel. If you have questions or comments that you would like us to include in our discussion today, please tweet to the hashtag HigherEdLive. If you are familiar with our episodes, or if this is your first time, you can access all of our past episodes for free on the archive. My brilliant friend and Student Affairs Live co-host Tony Duty and I broadcast approximately twice a month on Wednesdays at 1 Eastern Time. And you can also subscribe to our iTunes podcast. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a digital-first agency committed to tailored solutions that drive real results. In partnership with the National Research Center for Colleges and University Admissions, M. Stoner's myth-busting enrollment marketing research uncovers the best marketing channels and communication preferences that have the biggest influence on prospective students' perceptions of your institution. M. Stoner's white paper is available on demand by download, and you can get your copy today to learn more about what encourages prospective students to apply to your institution via the link that we are tweeting out now. Okay, now on with the episode. So today's Student Affairs Live is going to take a bit of a different approach. Instead of serving as just the host and the facilitator, I'm also going to participate a bit in today's discussion because for this episode, we're going to focus the conversation on developing a comprehensive co-curricular record. Specifically at Michigan State University, which is an initiative that I have been engaged in for the past 2 years with my colleagues. And I've long thought about bringing this topic to Student Affairs Live, but didn't know how to do it with also knowing a lot about it on the backside, and just decided a conversation would be the best way to go. So I am grateful for the opportunity to end the semester here at MSU with this discussion. With my colleague and co-steward of the project, Dr. Bill Heinrich, the Director of Assessment at the Hub for Innovation in Learning and Technology at MSU. Hi, Bill. Thanks for being here today.
Hi. Thanks, Heather.
And we have two students joining us. Eric Kang is finishing his first year as a master's student in MSU's Student Affairs Administration program and has served as an intern in the Hub, working with the co-curricular record. Hi, Eric. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
Great. And Lauren Lackey, a second-year student studying public policy, is also joining us today during finals week. And I'm so grateful for you as well. On today's episodes, these colleagues of mine are going to delve into the process, complexities, and engagement in cultural change that we all participated in here at Michigan State over the past couple of years to explore how we work to develop this comprehensive record currently entering the pilot phase. And we're providing this episode not as a way to say MSU's doing it all right, but to explore the complexities at a large, comprehensive Research One institution that is very decentralized as a way of possibly talking about how those processes and design challenges could be overcome. And it's still in process, right, Bill?
Yes.
So I'm going to turn it over to you all to introduce yourselves. But first, I want to just, again, reiterate my gratitude, especially to Lauren, our undergraduate student on the panel today, for taking time out of a busy finals week. And a comment that I know that undergraduates are a key beneficiary of our work with the co-curricular record. And they have been engaged in the development from the very start. And yet on Student Affairs Live, we often talk about undergraduate students, but we rarely talk with undergraduate students themselves. So Lauren, welcome. I'm thrilled to have you joining us here today. And I'd like to start introductions with you. So tell us more about yourself.
Thanks. So yeah, my name is Lauren Lackey. I'm a second-year student studying public policy here at Michigan State University. I'm super involved both on campus and off campus. I'm a student brand ambassador for Cliff, which is the Cliff Bar company. So I'm working to promote their products and more sustainability on campus. I'm a student academic advisor for the minor in environmental and sustainability studies. I'm a private and university tutor, so I work with students to work on math, English, and humanities courses. I'm the mentor coordinator, so I'm working with first-year undergraduate students that are going to be bringing in a new cohort of students, and I'm making sure that their transition from high school to college is as seamless as possible. I was also a former teaching assistant for NSC 192, which is an environmental issues seminar. I'm also going to be part of the homecoming court for next year, which I'm super excited about. So I'll be representing the political science department on that. I've also recently been accepted to the Political Science Scholars Program, where they take the top 15 undergraduate students in the political science department, and I get paired up with a mentor and have some really cool opportunities through that. And I actually just found out yesterday that I've been accepted to a linked bachelor's and master's in public policy program. So I'll be graduating 4 years with both my bachelor's and my master's degree in public policy.
You can see why Lauren is joining us today. Total rock star student, tons of co-curricular work, and is actually going to be leading the pilot initiative with the RISE Mentor program. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks.
Eric, let's go to you next.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eric King. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a first-year master's student at MSU with the Student Affairs Administration program. As part of my formal academic requirement, I decided to do my practicum with the Hub, and as part of that is my involvement with the co-curricular record. And I've been working with the Hub for this past spring semester, and I'll also be continuing the work as the pilot moves forward.
Great. Thanks for being here, Eric. Where did you go to undergrad, just to point that out?
So for my undergraduate degree, I went to UCLA, so University of California, Los Angeles, got my degree in psychobiology, and then worked professionally for 2 years as an assistant resident director with Residential Life. After 2 years working professionally, decided to move towards the master's degree in Student Affairs Administration.
Awesome, thanks. I love hearing the backstory a little bit. Bill, welcome. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Heather. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Heinrich. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm currently the Director of Assessment in the Hub for Innovation in Learning and Technology here at MSU. It's a new office at MSU where we consult and facilitate for major learning-focused revisions on campus. So that can be curricula, it can be departments, it can be student learning kinds of things. And in this case, I'm co-stewarding with Heather the co-curricular record development on the campus. We'll talk about that a little more. I did my undergrad a while back at Northern Illinois University and did a master's degree in student affairs at Michigan State. Finished that in 2001. Worked as a ski bum and guide for a couple of years, which actually taught me a lot about my career. Got back into residential education at UC Santa Cruz, go Slugs, and then moved back to Michigan State for a doctoral program in higher education, which I finished in 2015. Glad to be done, but the thread through all of that is the one of experiential learning and assessment. And those have driven my career decisions and got us, and I think in a lot of ways got us this far as a team to bring this record to MSU. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. As you can tell, this is going to be a really interesting conversation. We all come at this from many different perspectives. But before we move to the specifics, Eric, I know many of our audience members are familiar with the concept of co-curricular, what that means exactly. But can you talk about how we define that MSU and how we differentiate it from other types of experiences like extracurricular, curricular, et cetera?
Absolutely. And so, as you may know, co-curricular activity is often associated with learning activities, and we often hear about the words thrown around: curricular, co-curricular, and extracurricular. They often get mistaken between each of the terms. However, here at MSU, we're looking at the co-curricular activity, which we define it as which requiring student participation outside the scope of an academic course of study. So looking at the MSU-sponsored activities here at the institution, and how do these activities specifically contribute to a student's achievements as it relates to undergraduate learning goals or specifically outlined outcomes. And so one of the nuances between the difference between curricular and co-curricular is when we're looking at curricular activities, they are often credit-bearing activities that are particularly part of an academic requirement. So maybe for a particular class or a course of study, some classes may have an experiential learning component, and that shows up on their academic transcript. However, there are a lot of co-curricular activities that do not fall on an academic transcript because they don't bear any academic credit. However, these co-curricular activities are linked to specific learning goals, competency areas, and that's what's one of the distinguishments away from extracurricular activities, which are generally activities that are not part of the normal classroom experience and may not be attached to specific learning goals or outcomes.
Cool. Thanks.
One of the interesting layers to Eric's description is that at MSU, we were given the charge to create this version of a co-curricular record by our provost, our chief academic officer, and she instructed us to look and consider the academic rationale for co-curricular activity, which is a little bit daunting. And at being a student affairs person and an experiential learning person, I realized, like Lauren described, there's lots of out-of-classroom activities. So we defined academic in the learning space, rather than in a credit-bearing space, which gave us a lot more freedom to consider the many things that Michigan State University practitioners across student affairs functions are already doing. And that design scope informed the kinds of decisions we made along the way to include and make this record much broader than any one organizational silo or division. As Heather mentioned, we're a big operation here at Michigan State, kind of a big circus tent is my metaphor for this, a bunch of rings in the circus that you could consider organizational silos. But the reality is student affairs functions happen across many different functions, including in our 14 undergraduate serving colleges, each of which has, or many of which have, a director of student affairs. They work with students in the same capacity as our division, which is our formal organization, our division of student affairs, as well as a few other functional areas. So to include all of those groups and all of the activities, we had to work with a mindset where our problem space was more broadly defined than a particular function or division, which informs a lot of the conversation. So you'll see things in our co-curricular record like undergraduate research and internships and co-ops and service learning, and we have a lot of ands. The major dividing line we drew, as Eric mentioned, is at the credit non-credit line as a starting point. And so those design decisions followed a process of design thinking. We followed Stanford Design School's model. In this case, although there are many good models of design thinking that have led us to include a lot of stakeholders in our problem definition. And the problem being, how do we know? How do we know what counts? How do we know what value? How do we know when we're doing it right? Which we'll talk about a little bit more.
Yeah, the complexity of the institutional structure, I think, necessitated an approach, the design thinking approach, as Bill just mentioned, to engage stakeholders across this complex institution. Given that this was a charge by the provost, I think one of the things that we attempted to try to do is engage people who would be objectors, or maybe not direct objectors, but who would be not necessarily on the immediate bandwagon. And I think that one of the things that we also recognize is that this this conversation had been ongoing for years, and some people said decades. So it's a complicated context to start a conversation about documenting learning outside the classroom. So, Bill, I know you mentioned a little bit about design thinking. Can you just delve into that a tad more, and how that integrated with the process, so that folks who aren't familiar, I wasn't familiar with it, know a little bit about kind of the steps. I mean, I think it's a model that can be utilized for integrating any kind of big institutional cultural change.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Design thinking is, for me, it's a mindset of process-oriented decision-making. One of the privileges we had in developing this record is there was nothing to undo in the process. So we had the opportunity to really build something new and do so from, not from no experience, but with a lot of latitude. So design thinking typically begins with an empathy building process where we're reaching out and figuring out who's interested and what their needs are in this space. And in that empathy building, we identified lots of stakeholders, lots of people interested. In all of our undergraduate colleges was a really useful thing to do. So leveraging our personal and professional networks was really key. Deciding that the answer to additional participants was always yes. We want people to in principle participate in this, and then realizing what our value propositions were to the campus, which are actually multiple. We have several value propositions, which we'll get to. But in the design thinking process, so we understand that through a process of empathy building and relationship building, which is not unlike most culture building processes. Following that, we had a clear definition of the problem and how it affected different people. From that, we could start to ideate and come up with lists of solutions, some of which were technological, some of which were, like in any policy case, do nothing. And then at each turn, we made reports to our key stakeholder, the provost, and we're instructed to keep going so far. So knock wood there, and hope we get to keep going. But at this, along the way, we asked for money. We got more invested and got funding for what is now we purchased a vended technological solution to meet our pedagogical and sociocultural needs, rather than the other way around. So considering it a cultural project instead of a technical project was one of the key approaches there that kept it from being a technology in search of a solution, or technology in search of a pedagogy. In this case, we really found a good product that works for our needs. But I would say the design mind, or the mindset of always learning in that space and iterating and making some mistakes actually but making them fast and learning from them quickly was helpful.
Yeah, I like the concept of sometimes failures are a good thing, and it allows you to go back and kind of rethink. I mentioned that students were involved in the process from the beginning. Lauren, I know you weren't necessarily involved in the beginning, as you're now a second-year student, but could you talk a little bit about kind of what you see as a student as the value of this type of record, how you would use it, what you would put on it? Hopefully it will be here by the time you finish your master's degree, so you can put your undergraduate experiences into the co-curricular record.
Yeah, definitely. So this is honestly like an invaluable piece of like the college experience that's missing from MSU. It's one of those ways where you can take everything that you're doing outside of school and that you're learning and are putting towards your education. And it's a way to collect it all and have an official record of everything that's going on. A really good example of this would be the Bailey greenhouse that we actually have right outside of Bailey. A lot of my friends are horticulture majors, and they're able to learn about how to grow organic plants and do things like that. And they take their time out of their week and they go into the greenhouse and actually put that into action and actually like grow these organic plants and use what they're learning in order to make a real life experience out of it. And it's just something that isn't necessarily like responded to well at the institutional level right now. There's no record of it. There's no way to keep track of what people are doing other than a resume. And I think that there's a really good like distinguishing factor, because these are all things that you can't fluff it up, like you do it or you don't. And this is a way that the university can keep track of that. And I think this gives a lot of credibility to everything that the students are doing and experiencing. And it's something really, really valuable that we just don't have right now.
Yeah, I think as we were working on this bill, I knew that students were our kind of primary beneficiary, and we know that students will, and we'll get to how we're planning to communicate with students and help them learn how to use it. But there are definitely other values of this, right, in terms of who benefits on campus. And so we hope that students will use it to track all the things, amazing things that Lauren listed outside of the classroom, but also to use it as a space to reflect on how those learning experiences interrelate. And that because of it being university validated, that adds a layer of credibility that a student's resume wouldn't necessarily have, as Lauren mentioned. But at the institutional level, aggregating this data is going to be key for decision making, for understanding the types of experiences. Even for like a college dean to say, where is undergraduate research happening in my college, and to be able to pull that, which not only helps them, tell about the story of their college, but also benefits the faculty who are doing this work. So the university, I think, is another kind of key beneficiary. The institutional data, I think, somebody's dissertation will be amazing as a result of all of this. Not mine, not Bill's. We're done. Maybe Eric.
My future dissertation.
Your future dissertation.
Come here,
other,
study us.
Yeah, exactly. I think the other part, and Bill, maybe you can also talk a little bit about this too, is that we at the beginning spent a fair amount of time circling around this idea that employers were going to want this thing, and that we needed to know, like, what would employers need to know, and it almost like the conversation could begin and end there. So talk about that a little.
Well, it almost did begin and end there. I mean, it almost did end there, right? So the employer, without the data, the employer conversation is a bit of a catch-22. You need the data to demonstrate to employers that the data is valuable, but the employers won't tell you if it's valuable unless you have the data. So collecting the data is the first step, and the leadership decision at MSU was to actually go ahead and collect the data and do the hard work of creating a new record and figuring out how it integrates with our many existing technical and data systems, and figuring out how to get people to use it, which we're hopefully going to do in the next 6 or 8 months. So it's big, and it's kind of a big mess. But yeah, starting with the employers as the single value proposition was not our approach. It is one of our potential good outcomes here. Another potential good outcome is that students can do something with this for those employers or for graduate schools. Another potential outcome is this increases the value proposition of MSU's reputation. And until we collect these data sets, we really won't know, to be perfectly honest. So our lead value proposition for the campus is, in fact, to collect the data, put it in one place. So many of our student affairs colleagues and activity providers are already collecting this data, but it lives on their desktops and on their servers and in spreadsheets all around the campus. So it's hard to integrate that information and then put it in a relational database that lets us look at student pathways. So Lauren's a political theory. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Close.
It's fine.
I know what college you're in, Lauren, but I know where Lauren's studying, and we know some things about the other students in that college. And what we want to know is how to advise the next students and say, hey, if you take this major, your outcomes can be really helped if you join this club or that club, but stay away from this other place because that seems to take away or take too much time or something like that. So, I mean, there's lots of ways we can advise and use this in the future once we have the data. But we won't know until we have these experiences logged and we start to understand the patterns of our students in sort of a central way. And so that's been as an assessment person, I'm really interested in that, obviously, but the potential for MSU's brand to move forward is I think really high. And so I'm committed to this project.
So Eric, you are obviously a first-year student, finishing your first year, studying student affairs administration. I know this is kind of the theory to practice component to the program, but can you talk about, like, as a practicum student and as a scholar of this area, like what have you gained through this process, and how might that practicum experience also serve as kind of an exemplar of a co-curricular type of work, I guess?
Well, first and foremost, I'm really thankful for this position that I have. I think I've gotten a unique experience out of this development of the co-curricular record. In terms of practical experience, it's been really interesting to work on such a project of a large magnitude. And so it kind of references back to what Bill has discussed about how this project is more than just a technical project and how it's a cultural project. So through my practicum experience, I've had to interact with many different campus partners, working with our MSU IT department, interfacing with a lot of our pilot partners who are involved with undergraduate research and other leadership activities that we have here at the institution. And really understanding the nuances of how different departments have different needs, and how, although we may share and have stakes into this project, we all have different insight into what we're looking for in terms of outcome, in terms of value propositions. And so it's been really interesting to look at a singular project from multiple perspectives and trying to understand the nuances that occur between different departments and different goals. As an aspiring practitioner, I think what's critical about this type of experience is sometimes as you move on forward with your career and get accustomed to a particular functional area, it's really important to think about what cross-collaboration may look like in your role as a student affairs practitioner, and how we can work with other departments to really have a common goal, especially when we're looking at student success as our primary direction moving forward.
Bill or Eric, I think one of the interesting things is kind of what Bill mentioned earlier about how decentralized student affairs is here. And we know at other institutions, this type of initiative would kind of live within that division. And so perhaps the kind of that being able to collaborate across the campus, and, you know, we always talk about kind of breaking the silos or doing collaborative work across academic and student affairs. That might be another kind of key piece that you take away.
Absolutely. I think the co-curricular record serves as this overarching unifying piece that could exist for a large decentralized campus like Michigan State University. And the idea that there is a record that exists that all students are engaging with across campus, regardless of their major, their discipline, co-curricular involvement is kind of a unifying factor that can connect different students as they engage with this record and engage with their time here at MSU.
So Bill, let's talk a little bit about how we're going to get students to do this thing. So part of it is not going to be necessarily a choice, right? On their behalf, like some of the data will just automatically, they participate, it's going to be automatically added. But talk about student engagement, and then of course, Lauren, I want to hear, you know, what would make you want to get it, use it, talk about it, get other students to use it, that kind of thing. So we'll start with how student data gets into it first.
All right. Well, to answer your question, Heather, I don't know how we're going to get students to use this. So part of my design thinking approach to this is to continue to find smart people in these spaces. And so we're actually actively doing that. And so in fact, Lauren was in a focus group just last week, demo testing our new software, which with a bunch of other students. And that was really helpful just in our first round to understand that. So thanks again, Lauren. Yeah. You know, we want students to want this. That's absolutely true. So what we're going to do to start is make it as easy as we can. And so much like a transcript, the co-curricular record here will exist in a passive form. Practitioners will enter the data or enter the opportunity. Students will continue to participate in opportunities as they do now. They may never know that the co-curricular record exists. However, we will do a bunch of advertising and frankly some selling to get students into the record, because a student needs to consent and give permission to make that record public facing, which is a really important feature for privacy. There's lots of reasons to have features like that, which you can get into. But once students say yes, I want this, that becomes part of their MSU record. And so it's always there in the background waiting. It's just a click of a button away. So we've got to get people to want that. We have some other angles too, though, because we have a handful of our providers who will be pushing. The providers want good records of their students, and to get that, they need students' participation. So it'll be a bit of a two-way push in a philosophical sense. Now, the marketing communication plan, we've actually hired a group of students from MSU to develop a marketing and communications plan for students. So I have no qualms about saying I'm not an advertising person. And so we're trying to find resources on campus that we can leverage to make this good and useful for our students, because I'm actually curious, Lauren, what's going to make this attractive for you?
Yeah, so I guess for me, one of the biggest things is that even when I was listing off the stuff I'm involved in, I literally had my resume up on my screen and I'm like reading off of it. You can't remember everything I'm involved in all the time. And so I think having somewhere where you don't have to necessarily think about it all the time, but as you're involved in things, you can put it on and just see kind of what's going on would be awesome, because I can go back and whenever I need to pull up a list, I just click a few buttons and there it is. And I think as you were talking about, the ease of accessibility is going to be super attractive to students, because it's going to be easy for them to just access it and see anything that they need to do.
Yeah, I think that we're having a little bit of echo issues, which is constantly a problem in the Hangout. So thanks for hanging with us. I think also, Lauren, if you knew that a specific opportunity was going to be on the record, like would that drive your involvement, or would you go back, like for example, to a club or organization and say, why aren't you on the record? Like, could there be kind of a push-pull type of engagement that way?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the cool things too would be if I were to be able to look at like the co-curricular record and see a list of organizations I could potentially get involved in. There's a lot of like people that aren't like online or accessible on Facebook or anything like that, where I can see that there's different clubs on campus. So having this record to see things that will not only match with my major and my areas of interest, but just other things that I can get involved with will be really cool, because I'll be able to see all of that in general. And I just think that will be an incredible way for me to get more involved than I already am, and for other students as well who might not necessarily know how to take like the first step to go meet a club or do anything like that.
Great. Tell me how you see this as different from LinkedIn or other types of, you mentioned social media. So I was like, oh, how else are we talking about the things that we're gaining from college, and why might this look different? And anyone else can jump in also.
Yeah, I just think one of the cool things would be the learning objectives. You don't necessarily get that out of everything. So you could be working a side job and not necessarily have like a certain learning outcome that you're getting by participating in that. But by having clubs that are not only recognized and like verified by the university, but also by the people that are helping run them, the faculty advisors, you have this not only sense of verification, but also you know that there's something that you're getting out of being a part of that club. I think having a list, including the different things you're getting out of it, is going to be super beneficial, because you don't necessarily get that with LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter when people are posting things about these different clubs. You have like actual set of things you're going to be learning by participating in them, which is really, really cool.
Bill and Eric, in your early conversations with the students, what have they suggested we call this? Because co-curricular record might not have the marketing pizzazz.
No, in fact, so again, along the journey of developing this idea here at MSU, Heather and I worked with a different group of master's students in our student affairs program who did a bunch of market research about what other schools and other institutions call this kind of activity. And their number one top line recommendation to us was, don't call it a co-curricular record. So hence my decision of recent months to go with a marketing team to help us figure out what that name is going to be. So I mean, they came up with some nice names. There's some likely leaders here given our context and environment, but I don't want to give away anything yet. But basically, I'm putting it back in the hands of students to help us figure this out.
Mm-hmm. Great. Anything else that you've observed or heard, Eric, as you've talked with students in the focus groups?
Mm-hmm. I think I think students, as they first interacted with the demo, in that introductory demo, I kind of walked them through what the program looked like, and I think as they were kind of engaging with the technology, they were already starting to see some of the benefits that they could get from the co-curricular record. So already making connections to how this could maybe bolster their resume, or how a lot of these positions, when we asked them to recall some of their co-curricular involvements, we had a few seniors as part of our focus group, and some of them had difficulty trying to remember like their sophomore year or their third year. And so I think the CCR for them is not just a record, but a living document that kind of tracks their comprehensive career here at MSU. And so that's one of the first things that I noticed, that they were already making connections with the CCR with very little context and very little knowledge of it.
Yeah, and at the same time, it's not a resume. It's not, much like a student wouldn't submit a transcript to an employer and expect, to get a job interview. The co-curricular record, in the same way, isn't a ready-made resume, or isn't an artifact that you might want to directly share. But it helps students make sense of and keep track of, and hopefully then make sense of their learning experiences on campus that, as we know and want and plan for, are integrated with curricular activities in classrooms and labs and field studies, but also in the co-curricular space of employment and activities and research and other things that students do. So yeah, we're really attentive to that integrated space and creating a record that helps students make those integrations more readily, without having to track as much of their own or try to remember all the little things that happened several years ago in the midst of a busy time of life, depending on the undergrad.
So last month, I had the opportunity to talk with the authors of the newest edition of the book, How College Affects Students. And I was struck by the opening line of that text, which states, "The purpose and value of higher education are under fire." And a big piece of that book was trying to make the case that college matters. And I'm interested, Lauren, I know you're studying public policy. We talked a little bit about this in preparation for the episode. Like, how does the evidence in a co-curricular record help make the case that college matters, that there's value in particularly bricks and mortar type of institutions where students are coming, and then also, how do we help make this an accessible experience for students who may not have, either they need to work outside in order to make money, or they take a lot of online classes? Like, what do we do with those students too?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the really interesting things is that we've seen a shift in American society from a more societal benefit standpoint of things to a more individualistic approach, which, in talking about that, it means that people are more looking at individuals and saying it's your job to make sure that you're getting an education, and so that you can get these individual benefits like making more money, getting a better job, and being able to do what you want to do. This approach has limited the amount of funding that you're seeing in higher education, which is also harming the students because you're having to pay more in order to attend these universities. The co-curricular record, one of the really, really cool things about it is that you're able to document all of these learning experiences that you can't necessarily get at an online institution. So while you're paying more money, you're getting these other experiences that will help you and help society in the future, because you have these outside perspectives on things that you wouldn't be able to necessarily get otherwise. I definitely think that having this like valid form of understanding everything that you're participating in and how it's helping you as a person not only grow but learn, and to help, like, in general society as a whole, because you're putting out and getting more into it so that after you graduate you can actually be a very beneficial like human and part of like America, which is so cool. And I just think that this specifically will help students understand the importance of having these outside learning experiences, because right now it's just go to class, like get your degree, and then hopefully you can figure something out. But having this will just help them see how beneficial it really is to be really involved.
Awesome. Other thoughts on that from Bill or Eric?
Well, Eric, jump in here. So yeah, Lauren brings up a really interesting set of points, and it's points that are essentially out of scope for this particular effort to build a co-curricular record. I want to kind of know where our boundaries are with the immediate work, but having that short game conversation of the record building with the long game conversation that Lauren's having, simultaneously has been one of our continual approaches in this space. And so we're having conversations about what are high impact practices, and do we know if they actually matter? And there, we understand the literatures, and we're mapping. In fact, Eric spent quite a bit of time early in his practicum coming up with a whole set of competencies vetted in good literatures that will make us a smarter tracking system when we implement it. So thanks again, Eric. But we're attentive to what we think matters. We're going to ask that question intelligently and try to understand what actually matters in a more holistic way, because this point is not lost on us in developing a record that does one narrow band of work, but it speaks to a much bigger experience of what is this value of college, how are our undergraduates benefits, what can the institution do differently to help students who are struggling. I mean, there's lots of ways this data can support students if we're smart about it. But we're having those conversations along the way. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, just to add on to what Bill's been talking about, a lot of those critical conversations are happening now. We're not just focusing on the pilot and the implementation of what this would look like for our pilot partners and for students, but thinking about the longevity of this project and trying to project what are the outcomes, what will the co-curricular record look like in 5 years and 10 years, and the impact that it may have that Lauren kind of alluded to when we're thinking about students and where they go out into the workforce.
That's great. I'm conscious about quality and how we assess quality. What I guess, is there a litmus test or an idea of making sure that what we put on the record is value? Maybe Eric, you could start, and then I'll turn to Bill. But I'm curious about these competencies that you identified. Were there some common themes? Like, how did you collect those? What did you kind of narrow towards?
Mm-hmm. So some of the literature that I was looking at were focusing on competency-based programs, how they were drawing and crafting their competencies and learning outcomes. And one of the literature that I drew on was Corey C. Miller's leadership-based competencies, looking at how they were framed and what perspective, looking at how C. Miller examined like value, behavior, action, and how we could tie those to some of the co-curricular involvements that we're seeing with our pilot partners, whether it's undergraduate research, internships, and co-ops. And so looking at those outcomes, there were a lot of relatable connections that could be drawn, and it was broad enough where this could be applied to many different types of co-curricular activities beyond the initial pilot that we're working with. And so we wanted to make sure that there was a competency-based system set in place as we add more activities, more learning, more co-curricular involvements into this system. And so that was one of our starting points, looking at what competencies we can connect each activity with. And I think one of the big pieces is how the information and positions are put into the co-curricular record. So when we're thinking about these activity providers who are working in different departments, different colleges, and how they input their positions and their activities, making sure that they have articulated clear learning outcomes for each activity, because that is also part of our documentation and our validation process of capturing the learning that happens outside the classroom through these activities. And Bill can definitely elaborate more.
That was really good. Heather and I worked with a lot of stakeholders in this space, trying to understand what would be quality. Some of the debates we had with our colleagues was whether or not this would serve as a program evaluation tool to assess program quality. And in a way, by having a bar of learning outcomes and a quality entry, there is an evaluative quality to that. But we're not making the effort in this effort, we're not going after a full year-long program evaluations according to CAS standards or anything like that. That's still the problem of those programmers themselves. We're also not, so from the other boundary on the other side is we're not involving every registered student organization de facto. Those student organizations have to write down a learning outcome and have their advisor vet that and enter that in the system. So we've created some, some guardrails, I guess, for what would go in and how we would assess quality. Another big conversation we had was how this is not going to rise. We didn't want this project to rise to the attention of academic governance and become a competing curricular model. And so we're really not creating anything new except the standard itself to enter into the co-curricular record. We're relying on stakeholders to continue to do good work, our practitioners on campus to continue to make student success a priority and do that in ways that are value added and aligned with good practice and literature, et cetera. So Heather, you were involved intimately in those conversations. Do you want to speak more about any of that?
Yeah, I mean, and I was just going to also add that we got a great question from Twitter from Brittany Lawton asking about how we plan to engage internal stakeholders to get the positions and activities added. And I think, that goes into what Eric was saying, like there is a process and there's an application, if you will, to be able to put a specific entry in or a position or activity. And we've talked a little bit about like what's the easiest way to build a system so that isn't an onerous process. But I think a big part of it has to do with this idea of engaging internal stakeholders from the beginning when we were starting to have conversations to help, I guess, to not only hear the things that would make them want to have this as an option for their students, but also the aspects of it that would make it too complicated to use or potentially as a distraction. So my hope is that through kind of the iterative process that we went through in creating a validation instrument in the beginning, and what we mean by validating is that the activity is being validated. The validation of student participation will live at the departmental or the program owner level. So for example, an RA, resident assistant in housing, the activity of being an RA or the program of being an RA would be added, but then an individual who participates as an RA, housing would track that and then upload a list of all the students who met the requirements or whatever for fulfilling an RA position over the course of the year. And I think that's a really important kind of component to this because when we think about scalability at an institution, we didn't want every single one of how many RAs do we have here at MSU, Eric?
We have over 250.
250 RAs. Yeah, we didn't want each one of those students going in and submitting their own activity. So we needed some kind of batch loading process as a way to kind of scale it. So defining which programs are that and which programs are individual ads is really key too, I think. And I think a big part of it has been having conversations with folks, helping them understand the value, and building a system that will make it easy for them to use. Anything else you want to add about that? Should we move on to the next?
I think we can move on. Brittany has another question about our implementation process. So yeah, I can just give a brief overview. Yeah. So we purchased a vended product that we're pretty happy with, and we're in the process of integrating systems now. And our first launch, our first module will go live June 1st. So we're coming up on a pretty hard deadline, about a month away. And then we're going to roll out our, so in the process of all these design conversations for a couple of years, we identified a handful of really willing and key partners that represent a broad array of the kinds of activities we want to capture. So undergraduate research, for example, has a really individual, a student-to-student difference. And so uploading a job description isn't really an option like it would be for the 200 or 300 plus RAs on our campus, resident assistants, where all the RAs are assessed on some level of quality, but essentially have the same job description. And yeah, they do different work, but we're recognizing that one thing. So we had to figure out how those were going to operate differently. So our pilot partners represent those activities. And we have 15 pilot activities in our system, which will go live this fall. And we're going to do our best to learn. I've hired an evaluator to help us look at that. And yeah, so we're going to hustle now. And then hopefully launch to the wider campus spring of 19. We're coming up pretty fast on implementation. So the high fidelity pilot, in that we're covering a lot of different kinds of activities, was a pretty important feature to get our provost to sign off on this. She wanted to make sure that we had a fighting chance to launch it to the campus by learning along the way. And so, that was a big feature, and that came out of the designs and the feedback from our hundreds of stakeholders that we've now engaged in this project.
Great. Let's see. Where are we in our conversation here? Okay, so one thing I think, Lauren, that I think is critical is that if this is going to be used by students, it has to be easy to access. There has to be value. You and I kind of looked on a couple of other institutions' co-curricular records. What are some of the things that would make it useful for students, in particular in the using stage?
Yeah, definitely. I think making it as easy as possible and as streamlined as possible is going to be something that will draw students in. If you only have to do click 2 or 3 times to get something added, they're going to be more willing to do that than something that you have to sit down and work at it for hours on hours, because they just don't have time for that. I think that's something that will definitely help them get a little bit more engaged and ready to use it. But another cool aspect, like at University of Toronto, was that you can look on there and find different opportunities based on your interests. So they have lists where you can go down and click on different things that might be of interest to you to explore the different activities that have these learning outcomes available. So it's a way to not only expand your horizons for things that you're interested in, but it's also a way for you to go in and just make sure that you're getting all the opportunities available to you at any given time, which is really cool.
The one last thing I thought might be interesting to just spend a minute on, Bill, is the role that the hub has played in all of this. We're really fortunate, as you mentioned, this is a relatively new office on campus, but that the work and development of this project is one of many, and that this won't permanently live in the hub. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so like I said earlier, the hub is essentially a facilitation and consultation or design firm on our campus for our campus. And so there's about 40 different individuals who are assigned some time to work on projects in the hub. And a project like the Co-Curricular Record consists of a charter with goals and deliverables and deadlines that we're accountable to, and that we ultimately, as a hub, we deliver to our partner, which is another on-campus constituent. In this case, our provost chartered this or sponsored this project and is the project owner. So the provost is ultimately responsible for taking on the sustainable solution that we help to create. At some point in the hopefully near future, the hub will hand this off and be we're not going to wash our hands of it, but we're not maintaining effort in this space. And so in that sense, my role in the hub has been to steward this project. And yes, I have a lot of personal ownership. My background and career trajectory lines me up to lead these conversations with Heather and Eric and Lauren and many, many others who've been participating in these conversations. That being said, it's not mine. And at the end of the project, I get to hand it off, which is kind of a neat thing. And so so we're in constant. In fact, we're in a phase transition now with the eventual owning portfolio in our office of the Associate Provost for Undergraduate Education. So that's ongoing. So the hub, continues to consult and muster resources and make sure that and facilitate processes. And we're managing the technical integrations now. We're managing the marketing and communications for now. We're managing the training and support of new users, which is going to be a big, as one of our guests alluded to, how are we going to get practitioners all over the campus to use this? We're going to go and talk to them is one of the answers. So we're managing that and how we're going to distribute that. We're asking for lots of support and funding on behalf of the project to make sure that it has people and resources and budgets needed to launch a big idea like this. So as much as it's culture building on the front end, now it's pretty tactical. And like every other project, you got to have people and money behind it or else it doesn't really go places. So that's what the hub's worried about. That's what I'm worried about on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, shout out to our colleagues Corinne Rodzinski and Lizzie King, who would have been here on this call today had they not had lots of other things on their plate, but have been partners in with us. They work in that office and unit that Bill was mentioning, undergraduate education, and specifically with undergraduate research. So huge connections to many different units, but they've been really a part of this from the beginning, as well as many others on campus too. I think I'm ready to move to final thoughts. I'd love to hear any kind of takeaways that you all would like to leave with the audience today. Any resources that you'd like to share for folks who want to read more, continue learning, links, and we'll try to get out a list of resources for folks or post it onto this particular episode's website. So Lauren, let's start with you. Final thoughts.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is just use undergraduate students. We're such a good resource and we're willing and like ready to talk with people. But I feel like at a lot of big universities, that's kind of overlooked and a lot of changes and decisions are made. And so I just think like you guys have done an awesome job with like including us along the process, which has been awesome. And I think that's really going to help with like the actual implementation of it because you've got our like opinions and ideas and things kind of coming along. So I just think make sure that people use them because we're a great resource and we're here to help.
Thanks so much, Lauren. I so appreciate you. Eric.
My takeaway was similar along the lines of Lauren, actually, thinking about how critical it is to incorporate the student voice in a project of this matter, as well as trying to be comprehensive with everyone who's involved with the project. I think when you're looking at a project of this magnitude that has it's very high impact across campus, it's really critical to make those connections to different departments that you may have not interacted with before, building relationships, setting up those meetings to really have these critical conversations about the direction moving forward. So I think my biggest takeaway is really understanding the importance of communication and the doors that it opens for a project like this.
Bill, your final thoughts?
This is a culture building project. It's not a technical project. Yes, we're going to use technology, but building culture is creating a new record. I mean, that's really a cultural expression of what we care about. And doing so in a way that's inclusive and value added to lots of different people. I mean, we have 40,000 undergraduates, and this will be open to graduate students too. But you know, we want this thing to work because it matters to students and it adds value to their lives. So if you're taking this on, remember that you're asking people to change their behavior. You're asking people to do something a little bit differently. I mean, those are ultimately change moments and need challenge and support. We need to encourage new and exciting opportunities with appropriate kinds of support. So in that sense, you know, student affairs people are really well positioned to take on these kinds of projects or join them. And I encourage you to do that as it makes sense. So yeah, those are my final thoughts. Thanks.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add as far as my final thoughts, just to build on the relationship piece and the cultural change piece, is that when you think about the kind of massive institution like MSU, it's easy to say we're just going to throw a technological solution at it and hopefully make the type of change that we're hoping for. And what I have constantly reflected upon and even wrote about for a class when I was in the middle of a leadership class was that it really is about a group of people coming together to accomplish change for this like broader common good, which is the institution and for our students. And that leadership isn't one person. It's not one individual who's kind of the spearhead of this. It's about building collaborative relationships, and then that's the way that the culture kind of changes. Bill and I have written a few different pieces, so some resources that we'll share on the Hub blog about reculturing and thinking about scope and validation and technology, as well as how to integrate student success initiatives or how co-curricular projects make the case for student success. I think all of those hopefully will be good, useful resources to share. And then the other piece that I think we'll also tweet out is a link to a 2012 article that we spent a fair amount of time referencing and also talking with our colleague on campus, Phil Gardner, about as well as many others, about the meaning of what is extracurricular activity and what has the literature been that's defined this concept for us. So that article we will also tweet out a link to. I am so grateful to all of you for joining today and for spending your time on a Wednesday during finals week here at Michigan State University. Just to give you a preview of future episodes, Tony Duty, my co-host, will be here at the end of May, on May 30th, with an episode featuring research on the Student Affairs Facebook group and digital communities, which should be a fascinating topic about that professional networking space that some have called toxic. And next week, I am actually leaving the States to lead an undergrad education abroad program. And so my good friend, former cohort mate at Colorado State and frequent substitute co-host, Dr. Keith Edwards, will be back again, joining with an episode in June, on June 13th, about pedagogy beyond the classroom with Jane Freed, Ruth Harper, and Vijay Kanagala. And that should be really interesting and probably relates to this topic that we were just talking about today. You all can receive reminders about this and all of the other episodes on Student Affairs Live by subscribing to our newsletter. And you can also, of course, browse our archives for free access to any of our past episodes on higheredlive.com. Again, I'm Heather Shea. Thanks again to our fabulous panelists and to everybody who's watching. Make it a great week, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.